This is a Strategist episode 1848. My name is Zain Velji. With me, as always, there's one Corey Hogan, and there is also one Stephen Carter. Guys, what's going on? Don't care, Carter. Do not care.
Yeah,
do not
video.
Care. We have a
Corey
massive
told me
update.
to dress up, but I didn't know this was going to be a jacketed affair. I'm a little.
Yeah, why are we got three various definitions of dressing up?
Yeah.
You didn't get the memo at all.
What's your definition?
No, I usually come without a
What definition
t-shirt.
are you meeting?
So
Yeah,
this
true.
is an upgrade. Corey's wearing a suit jacket and a
No,
what is this, like
blazer. It's a
yes,
blazer.
it's a blazer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Knowing Corey, it's probably a suit jacket, Carter. It's not even
It's
a
a
blazer.
blazer.
He doesn't even shop blazer. He shops straight suit jacket. He's that guy. He actually
Yeah,
does.
he
He's
is.
that guy who doesn't even know the difference. Corey, can you tell us the difference between the two?
Oh man, a lot to do with the cut and the way it kind of fits below.
Sounds
So
generic. Sounds like a generic answer, Corey. Don't think
that's all
you
you're
know.
gonna get from
Don't
me.
think you know the
Not-
difference, Corey.
You know
Listen.
what? We're gonna get the menswear guy on here as a guest once we get through all of our other
Great
guests
account.
that we've got
by the
teed
way.
up
Yeah.
now.
Great account.
Yeah.
That's why I dress like this. He's inspired me to not even try.
To give up
and
Yeah.
wear whatever this
Yep.
is. I call this the Aziz Ansari on Fifth Avenue outfit. Now, Corey, you have a massive update. Just to remind our listeners, we have invited every Liberal leadership candidate onto this program for an unlimited amount of time, their discretion, whichever episode they want, up to them, to pump themselves, their cause, their candidacy. And the only caveat is that they have to host the show. And Corey, I suspect we are getting flooded in our inbox, which of course is media@cartersmonthlinut.com. Corey, give us the update.
Well, it does feel like you'd have to be insane not to take us up on that offer.
It's pretty
right,
amazing.
With our 7 million monthly listeners.
Yeah, give or
But,
take, for sure.
Give or take.
Yeah.
Give or take. But I'm a little embarrassed to tell you, Zane, we have no emails. I did check.
No
just before we
emails
came
at
on
all,
here.
or no emails from registered?
I mean, actually none. Like, you literally put out an email address on a podcast that is listened to by, as we already discussed, 7 million people.
That doesn't seem right.
Hang on.
That seems
and
like a
nobody-
you problem, not
nobody
a me.
has
The fact
emailed.
that nobody's emailed is more of a you problem. I
No.
feel like
it's problematic though, because this was our this was our plan for next week. Like,
because
you were going on
I
vacation.
do have a vacation.
Yeah.
This was a
Vacation's
way.
over.
Carter, this was a way for us to get Chandra Arya to host the show.
Yeah.
But can we pump this again? This is a public episode. Can I just say media@cartersmonthlinut.com, okay?
I can't
If-
believe
Because
no one's
Zane-
touched my nut.
Yeah. Okay.
no one's
That-
emailed.
we didn't need that. That wasn't a good bridge. But we have been told we have a bit of a credibility problem here. And I don't know. We might have hurt our chances of people emailing by using the email address that you just picked.
So what is the alternative email address?
I mean, let's just use that one.
Okay, so
it's set up
alternative
now. I'm not going to
settled
set up
already.
another one. Yeah.
media@cartersmonthlinut.com.
That's
Also, inquire, INQUIRE, at the CRA is politically motivated.com. Okay, that is where you can inquire at the CRA is politically motivated.com. That is where you can email us. In fact, you know what? Scrap the first email. If you are the person who wants to be prime minister, send us an email at inquire@the-CRA-is-politically-motivated.com to get your spot on the show to host what I guess is next week. Okay,
I
we're
want to
now
be
actually
in the room
yeah.
when someone pitches this to their boss. You know, I want to
No,
be in
no,
the
I-
room when someone says, "You know what?
Wait a
I
minute,
think this
Carter.
is a good idea."
Is this your way of saying you have not pitched this?
Okay, here we go.
I
Let's
have
do-
not
let's
pitched
do-
this to the Carney campaign. No.
Why have you not pitched this to the Carney campaign? Is it because you're not high enough on the
I'm
on the
trying-
like what's going on?
I'm trying to hang on to a shred, just a shred of credibility.
No.
Yeah.
Too late.
Yeah, I
It's
guess
a
so.
tough crowd. I get it, Carter. But often they are looking for new, bold, and innovative ideas.
No,
I see
no,
that
no,
guy,
that's-
man.
You're thinking
be
of
that
a
guy.
different campaign. The Carney campaign's just going straight ahead to become
Okay.
prime minister. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
it's a different
Wow.
thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Carter admits
Yeah.
on the
Shots fired.
episode. Yeah, shots fired against one's own campaign. That's good. No innovation here. Just pedestrian PMO powered campaigning. That's what
Exactly.
Christopher Freeland would say. That's
Exactly.
Listen. This is a long promised brand episode. We're going to get into the brand of each of the Liberal candidates now that the field has gelled, now that the field is solidified, Corey. But before that, can we spend, let's say 10, I'm going to give it 10. It might end up being 15. It might end up being the whole show. We may never get to the branding episode. There are three strategy questions on the table that I think are worthwhile to consider before we get into the branding episode, which we are going to do, Stephen Carter.
Sounds good.
And I want you guys to give me your take. I'm not going to do the strategy scale. I'm not going to do the fine, fabulous, or fucked. You guys just give me your take. And thing number one that I want to start on is Chrystia Freeland. It's the reference I just made, which is on the House this week. She was on the CBC radio program, and she mentioned that Mark Carney's getting all the endorsements of her colleagues, the cabinet ministers, because it's clear now that he's the insider candidate, and it is clear now that he is the PMO's pick for prime minister. And I'm curious, on a strategy level, Carter, you're clearly conflicted. If not conflict, well, maybe you're not, because you're willing to, speak truth about your campaign's lack of innovation. So who knows where you'll go here? But Carter, we just want to disclose your relationship with the Carney campaign, as thin as it might be.
Very thin.
Your words, not ours. But Corey, what do you think of this strategy by Chrystia Freeland? And I mentioned this earlier because there was talk of her team putting this out there to seed the ground prior to launch, but now we've heard it from her that Carney's the insider, he's the PMO-driven candidate. Like, this is the guy you want if you want more of the same, strategy-wise. And then how is it landing for you? Give me your take, and then Carter will come to you on the same.
Well, first of all, of course he's the PMO pick. Right? Like, we do know that. That doesn't necessarily mean he's continuity. The PMO might. I mean, it's unlikely, but it's possible. They know they need change in order to go forward too. So she's not wrong about that. And in a funny way, I think her argument is more true and more accurate than it's possibly going to come off. And that sort of gets to the point where we're talking about her on the House here. She was the fucking deputy prime minister. She was at the center of the Trudeau government forever until she was fired, apparently for a lack of competency. So, like, I don't know that this argument is going to work very much. I think it's likely to antagonize a lot of the Liberals, and I do worry a little bit on behalf of the Liberals for the amount of tape she's creating for the Conservatives to create in attack ads, right? Like, so the Liberals' best shot is they can break from this time. Freeland might win, Carney might win. It does sort of feel like the consensus is Carney is in the pole position at this particular moment, right? But if Carney does win, Freeland is starting to poison the Carney brand before going forward. And she might make the calculation, this is how I win, this is how I do it. But it does seem like a pretty high-risk strategy, because if you end up running for this man and you've convinced Canadians along the way of losing that he is continuity, I don't know. I mean, I just don't know that's a very wise idea. It makes me think back to that 2006 Liberal leadership race when Stéphane Dion, shouting at in Toronto, this debate of Liberal leadership candidates, like, do you think it's easy to make priorities? Which became that soundbite, right? In all of these ads, Dion almost shrill, hysterical, yelling this, became a Conservative attack ad. And then there's, Ignatieff saying, we didn't get the job done. And I just wonder, did the Liberals learn nothing in the past 20 years?
In the scope of the attack, and perhaps what it could be utilized for, Corey, or the effectiveness of the attack? Sorry, just so I'm clear.
How the attack can be used is a challenge. I think it is also a challenge that this attack is not likely to be effective. And when you combine those two, I can't give it particularly high marks, because you're essentially taking a line of attack that, with a more general audience, even people watching the House, I'm going to call a more general audience, they're going to say, yeah, but that doesn't really ring that true, Chrystia. You were the deputy prime minister. You were the finance minister. I hear what you're saying, but it just doesn't ring true. And you have, in the meantime, also created this potential attack ad for the Conservatives.
Carter, what do you think of this? And I'm giving you the strategist hall pass, which is, of course, what we give Stephen Carter to speak the truth, even if he's actively sitting on a campaign. It seems like you've already used it on this show, but I'll keep granting it to you for this particular question. What do you make of the Freeland strategy to say Carney's the insider, he's the PMO pick?
I think there's a credibility problem, to be sure. The credibility of being the person who's the deputy prime minister, standing beside Justin Trudeau for how many years now was it, Corey? 6 years? Something like that?
I mean, if you want to count it just in that tenure, but the fact of the matter is she was like an early by-election person under his leadership.
2013, around
right there since the start.
She was right there. And I mean, it's not like the Carneys and the Freelands are estranged. I mean, godfather to her children. This is this is in the family spat that is coming outside of the family, and I think it's because of desperation, because she's finding that the person who holds the knife very rarely wears the crown, and that is sparking requirement for I'm not the insider, you're the insider. And it just comes across as really weak. I suspect both of them have managed to pick up their fair share of cabinet ministers. Both of them have managed to pick up their fair share of members of parliament. And I suspect both of them are picking up their fair share of people who used to work in the prime minister's office. So this is just it's a fake call.
Let's be clear. They're both fucking insiders,
Oh, yeah.
right? Like them sitting there saying, no, you're more insider than me is just like the most glass houses, stones argument they could possibly be having. You have a former deputy prime minister arguing with a former Bank of Canada governor who was going to be the handpicked replacement for said finance minister. They're both insiders. And so to have this spat out there and create this ammunition, I think is... it's a choice, but I'm not sure it's one that she's going to.
Let's do a B-side on each of these. Corey, don't change her strategy, but optimize it. What would have made this play better for Freeland? You guys both talked about the credibility problem. Let's just say she had to be the messenger on this, because I don't want you to just be like, oh, hand it off to someone else, hand it off to a reliable proxy. No. What would have made this message better coming from Freeland? Corey, to you, then to Carter.
Well, it's not a message for a general audience. So I guess I'm going to play a little bit with the premise that you've given me here. I wouldn't make her the messenger to everybody. If she wants to make that argument, like I said at the start, I think it's actually kind of true, right? He is clearly the PMO pick. Pick up the phone, call influential liberals, work that phone of yours, get your team to work the phone, and have that conversation there. But like to have that conversation with the next level out, with those registered liberals who are only going to ever know you based on your persona and your brand, which is very Team Trudeau, like what is the point? You know, all you're doing is creating a sense of mess in the party, and you're throwing stones. Let's not forget, okay? You're not just throwing stones at Carney. You're implicitly throwing stones at Justin Trudeau and everybody around Justin Trudeau. And we have had this conversation many times on this pod. He's still very, very popular in the Liberal Party. He still has very strong control over the Liberal Party. He built up the executive. He selected the candidates. He picked the cabinet. And you're fighting with them. And I do not know that that's a particularly strong case to make internally, and I just don't think it's going to resonate externally.
Carter, make it better. Make Freeland's strategy better here.
Number one is timing. You don't do it when everybody's just signing up. It looks like you're just sad that everybody decided not to come for you. Plant the idea in people's heads first of all. Give them, like through back channels, start to plant the idea that Carney's the insider who's getting help from the PMO. That had started. Give it 2 more weeks to actually take hold, where the idea itself isn't preposterous. And all of a sudden, now you come out in 2 weeks and say, Carney's the insider. Carney's got all the prime minister's help. Here are the 26 people who used to work for Justin Trudeau who are now working for Mark Carney.
Bring up the court board with the red string.
Exactly. You know what? I actually would, just because I think that'd be hilarious. But you have to set the expectation before you can meet the expectation. So set people thinking about this before you actually start talking about it. And Chrystia Freeland just jumped before people were ready to hear her argument.
It's a parallel sort of point to one that a former colleague of ours used to make, Susan Elliott, if you remember Susan. And I always remember when Susan said that politicians who solve things that no one knows is a problem never get credit for solving it, even if they did it tremendously well. Problem definition needs to be what you spend a lot of your political capital on, and then you can come in as the solution, either your candidacy or your position on said policy. And I think this is a cousin to that in many ways, where you're driving right to the conclusion without kind of setting up the not the theatrics of the problem, but in some ways the theatrics and the casuals and the gradual sort of build up to the problem. Okay, I take that in stride. I don't want to spend too long on this. Number 2.
We're only on number 2?
Pierre Poilievre, Stephen Carter.
Oh, okay.
No hall pass needed for this, unless you're working on the Pierre Poilievre side of things too. Because if you started the last 2 weeks, that makes sense. Because he has not had a lot. He has not had
really
a good last couple of weeks.
It's been a rough 2
really
weeks.
Upsetting.
I think
Look,
so,
it's-
and I think this letter.
takes a
At least
while.
I'm going to put myself out there. I think this letter also speaks to a rough 2 weeks. He has written a letter this morning, and I'm going to read you he's 3 paragraphs. I'm going to read you 2 of the 3 paragraphs. So we record on Sunday. He writes his letter January 26th. Mr. Carney, I will get straight to the point. The reason that there is a Liberal leadership race for you to run in today is that the Liberals admitted that Canadians were done with Justin Trudeau and all the damage he's done to our country over the past 9 years. I'm going to skip to the last paragraph. You could be the prime minister in 43 days, and if you are to be any different than the man you are trying to replace, will you commit now to banning any prior Trudeau minister from serving in your cabinet, or will you hire the same Trudeau ministers to pursue the same Trudeau agenda and continue the same Trudeau failures that the country has rejected? Carter, I'm going to start with you on this one. What do you make of the Pierre strategy to put this letter out, this 3-paragraph letter addressed directly to Mark Carney? So the first strategy question is, the conservative approach just on Carney alone. And the second one is on this particular question to wedge him against the endorsees that are coming to support him, of course, being Carney. What do you make of this strategy?
I make very little of this strategy, Zain. I think it's a terrible idea. I think that the best thing that Danielle Smith did during the NDP leadership was shut the fuck up and stayed out of it. This isn't a thing that he can win. This is a thing that is an internal party battle. The general population's not involved and not paying attention, and he's just bringing more light to Mark Carney. That's something he does not want to do. Oh, the person that Pierre Poilievre is afraid of is Mark Carney, says the Liberal membership. Noted. This is a tremendously stupid idea, and I don't know why on earth Pierre Poilievre would do it. And talk about weak sauce. I mean, this isn't something that are people going? Are people thinking about this? Are people thinking about this every day? I wonder who Mark Carney will appoint as his ministers. Come on. There's going to be crossover because the best people are still the best people. I mean, it's absolute weakness.
Carter goes with the "why you so obsessed with me" angle on this. Corey, is this weak sauce by Poilievre, or is it actually a helpful wedge to him, even if his execution you may not agree with in terms of how he did it? What do you think?
No, I mean, this is not the trap he thinks it is. This is a bunch of people in a room who clearly thought, "Oh, he fucking got him." Yeah, we've been sitting here for 2 weeks, not able to react to the changing environment and the fact that we're now in this big fight with America, and that the entire landscape has changed, and all of our election plans for 2 years
Carbon tax
need to be
election
thrown
is
out the
gone.
window.
Yes.
We're not getting that carbon tax. No, but we fucking got him because we'll just point out that. Listen to me. People couldn't even point out who the current ministers are. They can't compare list A to list B because they don't know what either fucking list is. It's a pointless exercise. And look, I get it. You really want the election that you planned, but you've got to reorient yourself. That's just not, it's not going to be helpful. Here's what I would do if I were Mark Carney. 1, not respond. That's okay. Nobody gives a shit. It doesn't give Pierre Poilievre anything to work with.
And just because I know what he did, I'm going to just jump in quickly. Carney into the media today said something to the extent of Pierre Poilievre needs to find better things to do on a Sunday morning than write me letters. That was the version of his response. Keep going.
Yeah, that's basically 1. 2, just say no. Again, you lose nothing, and maybe you just want to say no because you don't like the guy very much. That's fine.
So what do you mean by
3,
say no? Like say no that I'm not going to appoint the same ministers? Just to be clear.
Yeah, like I don't recommend just getting into a conversation back and forth, but if you just said no and never engaged again, nobody would ever hear about it because see all of my points before this point. Or 3, just say, hey, listen, man, this is a time to build. We're not going to exclude anybody from the cabinet. My God, I'm not even sure I would exclude you, Pierre. We got to work together as a country. And just, you could basically respond any way you want with basically no downside. Like I normally when you see something that somebody has tried to establish as a trap, you think, tricky. How's he going to get out of this?
Oh, yeah.
For me, it's almost the opposite. It's like, how's he not going to get out of this? Like, how could he possibly hurt himself on this particular letter? Like, get a paper cut maybe if one of his staff prints it out? It's about all I can think about. Like, it's a pointless exercise.
Carter, option number 4, put out a press release tonight and do only one thing. Send the meme of the Mean Girls GIF that says, "Why you so obsessed with me?" And add no further comment.
Gen Z is going to shred that to pieces.
By
well, there you
fax? Is that how we're sending that? By fax?
No, send it whatever
Move on.
central bankers use to send info. I don't know if it's that pipe that they have that sucks up the canister.
The pneumatic one.
I like that.
That's good.
I like that.
Those
That
are
seems
great.
very central banker.
Costco
Hey, Carter,
pipes. I love those.
optimize this strategy for me. Don't change it. Don't not do it. Optimize this for Pierre for me. What would have made it better? I'm asking you to help on the margins. I'm not asking you to change this thing.
I probably would make it a list. And again, I would have waited. You in the last 5 days have been endorsed by Dominic
These
LeBlanc.
people? Yeah.
You've been endorsed by. I don't even know if he was endorsed by Dominic LeBlanc.
I don't think Dom
say
said
that.
anything.
But he's
Champagne and Anita Anand or
Champagne
whatever.
and Anand and all of these ministers. Can you pledge that these ministers who are clearly coming to you because they've been promised something, can you pledge that they will not be ministers in the next government? What have you promised them, and what is it that they're coming? Because the shit that Justin Trudeau promised them has turned out badly for the country.
No, you still fucking say no, or just
listen. He's trying to
as
give
he
me.
said.
He's giving me a big pile of shit and telling me to turn it into something good.
I'm surprised you guys think this is a bit. I mean, I think this will be a letter that goes nowhere. But maybe the other question is that do you think this will actually do harm to Pierre? Like, do you feel like
so it's
like
one of those? No, it's not going to do harm either. Like,
it's just a miss. It's not a hit. It's just a strikeout per se. But
if
fly
I were
landed
conservative,
on me one time had the same impact.
Yeah, if I were a conservative organizer, my anxiety from this letter would not be, oh, he's done damage to himself. It's, oh my God, he doesn't actually get what's happening right now.
Yeah,
this is all
or
shifting.
we just continue a bad streak, right? The streak is not broken.
Well,
in some ways, and I'm talking about days, not the years in the upswing of polls. But people in that world still live in days. What have you done for me recently, Corey? I'm going to ask you the same question. Optimize this. Don't change it. Optimize it for me. What would you have written differently?
Okay. Well, nobody knows cabinet. People know one cabinet minister. Pick one that people know. Commit to not putting our disastrous finance minister, Chrystia Freeland, in the cabinet. Can you do that?
Oh, that's
and
good.
then if the answer is no, you've still got a very interesting conversation.
Really interesting variant on my idea.
Yeah.
I think Carter's trying to say it's his idea.
No,
that's Carter.
no.
That's
you know
Carter's
what?
version.
You took Pierre's bad idea and made it a mediocre idea, and I took your mediocre idea.
It's a long time.
I made
since
it a
we've
great
talked about
idea.
variants
You
on
made
this
it
show.
a decent idea. You didn't make it a great idea.
He crawled so that you could crap your pants while toddling around, and then I took it and I ran with it.
Oh my
That's
God.
what happened.
That's what you
Good
get
to know.
when you wear a suit jacket.
No, it's good to know. It's good to know. The guy in the suit jacket.
Yeah, not a blazer,
on a
suit
weekend.
jacket. Prove
A
it.
suit jacket on a weekend.
Suit jacket.
Prove it's a blazer. Yeah, suit jacket.
In my basement.
Suit jacket on a weekend is a real pure
my
Polyev
kids' art.
Saturday morning.
My kid's art right there. Look, that's a pretty nice picture that Ben made. He calls it the
nice.
Derpy Beatles. It's the Beatles, but they're kind of derpy.
What does
nice.
derpy mean?
Yeah.
Does he know that
God.
you're putting that out to 7 million people this month?
Why are the Beatles not white?
All right. Are you
Why
coming
are
at
the-
my 8-year-old's
No, I'm just asking.
interpretation?
I'm asking the Hogan family, I guess, why the Beatles are not white.
I mean,
The
really,
Beatles
with
were
the
white.
music they made, they can't
This-
be.
This sounds
Okay.
like the Snow White and the
Let's
Several
move on.
Dwarfs.
Let's
Disney.
move on. Yeah.
Let's just move on.
Okay,
move
that's
on.
interesting.
I'll pass along to
23
Ben your
minutes in, we
critique.
haven't gotten to the premise of the episode yet.
CRT that's being taught in our schools, I tell you. Okay, Corey, final one. 3 of 3.
Yeah.
Third strategy question. Melissa Landsman, the conservative critic of something, is out giving a press conference talking about Nathaniel Erskine-Smith, now the housing minister, a Toronto MP. Talking about his endorsement of Mark Carney, calls him a radical drug advocate, all in a presser which seems to be on the street. People can find this video. It's much better than me explaining this to them. So go and find.
Oh, but do it anyway.
Sure.
Yeah.
So she's giving this
Let's live that
explanation,
dream.
being like, hard drug advocate Nathaniel Erskine-Smith has endorsed Mark Carney. I wonder what he got from that, kind of talking to the media. And then he seems to be in the wings. I don't know how or why. And he's like, you're talking about me? Comes up to her and like hugs her and be like, oh, well, welcome to my writing. I'll buy you a drink. And she's like, what did you get for endorsing Mark Carney? He's like, nothing. I got nothing. And she's like, okay, what did you get? It's like, I got nothing. And then I don't think it was a moment either of them wished it was, Corey, but like, I'm not sure what that was. So like, the reason I'm putting it here is I was so confused in terms of how to,
Yeah.
the online discourse is, fuck, this guy dunked on her. The other thing's like, what a creep. Like, that's kind of like the pendulum, right? Like, how dare you touch a woman? Why are you hanging around other people's press conferences, all the way to what a sociable, interesting guy who just like undercut the conservative argument in a matter of mere seconds. Corey, from
Sure.
a strategy perspective on both of their parts, what am I to make here? And please watch the
Well,
video rather than me having to explain this to people.
I mean, first of all, those are somewhat mutually exclusive positions, to put it mildly. It's a bit of a Rorschach test for people, right? Like, did he do a great job or did he do a shit job?
Yeah.
Did they do a great job or did they do a shit job? Well, I don't know. I kind of feel like the whole thing was awkward to watch. That was my basic feeling. Like, I'm not sure that anybody who wasn't already a diehard partisan is going to leave it feeling great about either party. Like, because on one hand, like, we're so used to the sociopathic nature of politics that it doesn't faze us when somebody walks into somebody's neighborhood and starts basically calling them, borderline a murderer and like a degenerate, right? And then somebody comes up and says, "Oh, hey, I'm not. Come here. We'll talk about it. I'll buy you a drink," right? And so on one level, the actions of Landsman are like, they're just so weird, like when you think about it. And his reaction in some ways was like almost like a shot of normalcy. But I also think if you look at it through the lens of, hey, she's just doing her job, she's being a critic, and this guy comes up and starts getting in her business and being kind of handsy, it's fucking kind of weird. So like, it really does depend on your frame and your lens. But I think generally speaking, there was enough where it just like, you feel uncomfortable watching because you're like, I don't know who's right, I don't know who's wrong. It kind of feels like they're both just playing fucking games and being children. I don't like this. And I feel like the general feeling of the public's going to be, fuck, this is the best we've got in both parties? Like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Carter, what do you think?
I think sins were committed by both sides. I think that the sin of the Conservatives continues to be the half truth, the implied, what did you get? What do you, what was the deal? I mean, they have absolutely no evidence.
Was that the sin, or was it just the aggressive, hard drug advocate line? Like, I wasn't sure where the sin, or maybe there's multiple sins, but I'm curious in your mind where it was.
I think that the whole fucking thing that the Conservatives are up to right now, they don't tell. They don't tell small lies about their opponents. They tell big lies about their opponents. And that's a problem. That's the sin. That's what I'm trying to get across, is their sin. But then, Nate comes into the picture, and the sin that he commits, which, you know what, I'm fine with. You stand up to those who are saying, falsehoods about you. I am a big fan of that. But then he puts hands on her. And I don't care if you're being friendly. I don't care if... It looks like you are trying to intimidate anytime you put hands on someone, and that's the sin that he committed. So I can see how both sides are taking this, and seeing their own narrative, because the sins are being committed on both sides. This was a stupid thing for Nate Erskine-Smith to do. It was a stupid thing for Landsman to do. Michelle Landsman? Or am I thinking Michelle Rempel-Garden? Melissa. It was a mistake. It was huge. And one of them could have come across as the true winner in this if they just played it a little bit differently.
Oh, this goes to the optimization. How and who, Carter? How could have changed their behavior with this interaction still happening to come out the winner, and who would have been the natural winner in this situation for you? Who would you have picked between the two characters that are involved, or the two people involved, I should say?
I think that Nate Erskine-Smith has some unique points of view on drug consumption that would have been really strong. I think that there's an opportunity to make that a wedge issue. To make Mark Carney answer for Nate's position, I think would be a very strong action. And I think if Nate Erskine-Smith simply comes in smiling and says, "You know what, Melissa, we could have had this discussion over a beer instead of, or maybe we should take this to a pub right now. I'll pay for the media. Let's go have a drink and we'll sort this out." Right? I think that both of them could have very easily solved the problem, but instead we have, each one of them just kind of doubling down and really making a mess of a perfectly good Sunday afternoon.
I like Carter's optimization. Corey, do you have one for me on this scenario, on this situation? You don't have to choose Nate as your character to go to. You may want to choose the other side, but you can. It's your choice.
Yeah, well, he picked Nate, so I'll pick Landsman. I think that if you had assumed that he had done exactly what Carter proposed, which is the obvious optimization there, like, don't keep your fucking hands off her, right? Like, just show up, do the rest of the stuff, but don't get so chummy that it looks weird, right? I probably, if I were her, if he's like, let's have a beer, you just say, like, I try to keep better company, and you're being exactly the example of why I think it is absolutely ridiculous that Mark Carney's decided to accept your endorsement. And I would have turned like that into that without I think just a little bit of a different tone and keeping the cool a little bit, and then pivoting it back to that main point. It probably would have been fine. As we talk this out, though, I actually think that she's probably, in this Rorschach test, I think that she's probably done less. Her acts were less egregious than his.
I disagree.
I've decided as we've talked.
I
this.
disagree.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Really?
Her
Her
acts-
acts were
I do.
less egregious than his because she was what?
I do.
Why? Because she was doing a standard partisan
Standard
Because
lie.
it was just like
Standard
normal
lies.
politics.
versus
basically.
him who was trying to break the norm and went too far. Is that like a fair assessment
right.
of what you're trying to say?
Yeah, well, and I think it's like the minute he went up and he started like grabbing her shoulders or whatever there. Carter's right about the intimidation component. I also think I often will try to put this into like a workplace setting. Like even if I thought somebody was being a real jerk and out of line at work, if the other person came up, it's like, hey, let's just talk this out and like grab their arms around it. I mean, HR would be fucking involved. So I think that's where I land.
Has
on
he
this.
convinced you, Carter?
No, I mean, I just think that both of them did bad things, and both of them should be shot at dawn.
Okay.
Tough but fair, Stephen.
That's a
Tough but fair.
That's one way to optimize. We're moving on to our next segment, Stephen Carter. That was a tight 10. That was a tight 10.
Real good work.
That was
man.
good. Tight 10. Anyone
Your
following?
time management is amazing.
But 10 minutes, listen, I give folks a lot of value, okay? I give folks
Okay.
a lot of value on the show.
You get like
Can we,
25 minutes
let's
of
talk about the
content in 10
branding.
minutes
We
with some-
have got a set field in the liberal leadership race. I've promised the audience for a while now a episode on the brands of the various candidates that are running and their teams, Carter, that have set up these brands. However, before we jump into it and start saying what we like and what we don't like, I think it's worthwhile to maybe spend, and I'm going to use this number again, 10 minutes, to to assess what we should assess as a modern brand, Corey, because I think it's actually a fair question, right? I think that piece has evolved from just simply what the website looks like, to and what the logo looks like, to other elements, things that we may not see, what the emails look like, what the ad library might look like, what the social accounts look like, what the grid looks like on IG, how they're doing, and in addition to the website and how well it converts and all those sort of things. So give me your thoughts on this. I'm kind of putting it out in the broadest sense with a few examples, but in your mind, as someone who works in communications and as someone who's worked in politics, what are the things we should be assessing in a modern political brand?
Yeah, well, first of all, we are saying brand, but I just want to be clear. Brand is ultimately the end result. It's what people think of you. It's how you come off.
Yes.
What you've listed there is largely identity. Like those are components of a visual identity, written identity, the words you use. And that's the kind of stuff a campaign has control over, but ultimately you judge its success or not based on what your brand is. So the brand is the outcome. The brand is not the action.
Love it.
And I
piece.
think that's important to keep in mind,
Yep.
especially as we go into some of these candidates, and maybe I'll keep my powder dry on that. But like a lot of these folks have a brand coming in. Like we already think things about them, which means the identity that they're presenting, visual, words, all of that, it pings off that in a different way. It pings off the times we're in a different way. And when we talk about brand, I guess the point I want to make right now is it's the combination of the identity, the audience, the times, the context, right? And so you've got to weigh it all. And what might have been a killer, quote unquote, brand, a visual identity 10 years ago, even if it's not that the style has changed, that same style might just be totally out of tune with what we're looking for right now.
And the audience piece could even make it out of tune with not even a dated 10 years ago, but also the moment. Like you're missing the moment in a sense, even if you think you're hitting the moment, sort of thing.
Absolutely. And like on our strategist Discord, which, pay your $6, get in there, gang. We created we created a fake creative brief for the Carney brand, like the Carney visual identity when it went down. And we went through all of the topics, and even just writing it out, one of the things that occurred to me is you're creating a brand for a leadership campaign, but it's also got to be the start of your brand for the general election campaign.
Which in extension has got to be the brand for the Liberals in the cycle.
So audience is a little bit
Yeah.
polluted right now too, right? You're not just talking about a narrow liberal voting audience.
That's
You're
interesting
talking
to me.
about
Yeah.
the general public potentially down the road too, because you got no time. Like, you got no time to sit there and say, we're going to retool everything 8 months from now. It's got to be the foundation of whatever your general
That's
election
so interesting,
campaign is.
and not to keep my powder dry, Cardinal. I'll get your take on this, but like that could have massive implications. Let's say Freeland is elected, her brand extremely distinct, right, with the red everywhere, and we could talk about it, right, and what implications will that have on the overall liberal brand? So it's an interesting point. We've talked about the politics, like all three of us in various forums, including this one, have talked about the politics of being able to run a race literally within seconds of winning this one, but then that's also got this tie-in, as folks on the Discord and you point out, Corey, to how you present yourself today having implications on how you present yourself in, as Pierre Poilievre would note, 43 days.
Well,
sort of thing.
yeah, and you
44
almost have to
days.
work backwards,
Yes,
right? Like, so
yes.
what's the brand I need then? What's the brand I need now? How do I bridge between them? Where do I put like the give, and like what's the shift got to be, and when's the shift going to happen? Should I be successful? And the risk always when you're dealing with two audiences is if you create a product that's good for both, it's probably optimal for neither, and that's a real challenge, I think. And so what you generally will see in these things is the person who thinks they're going to win is going to have their eyes furthest down the field. Like, okay, well, I don't want to win just to lose, or at least lose big, or go down in flames the way Trudeau looked like he was going to. I want to win. And if you're somebody who thinks this is a fucking Hail Mary, I don't know, I've got almost 0% chance, if rounding up, I've got 0% chance of winning this fucking thing, then your brand is going to be all focused on that first contest. Because why not? Like, are you really going to waste your time dealing with the brand down the road? And so I think that the way they present themselves also tells us a lot about how they think about themselves. And I would argue, based on that rubric, there are two candidates who actually think they can win, and that's Freeland and Carney. And everybody else is they're playing for the party, and they're not going.
They're trying to get their brand to lift them up a bit, or to make it uniquely distinct enough so that they punch through. Is that fair to say? Am I putting words in your mouth?
Kind of are, but you've brought up a really interesting point.
I don't let you have, and I'll let
For a
Carter
lot
get
of
in here.
them-
But this is good.
Well, look, I'll just say, final point. For a lot of them, it's about their brand and what they're going to be able to do down the
mean
road
as a
once
person?
they've elevated themselves.
Yes.
That's exactly right.
Right.
And so are they elevating who they are? And I think Karina Gold is a perfect example of this. She is presenting herself as a fresh, young, new face. That's the way she's doing it has value, win or lose, right? The way Freeland is presenting herself only has value if she wins.
Right. Interesting. Carter, Corey's thrown some interesting things on the table, including what brand is. Brand is the output and outcome. It's not something you can assess on the front end. It's is what I'm talking about, and rightfully so, to Corey's point, is more visual identity or broader identity, including the words, etc. So what the pieces we should be assessing today, we can continue to have that discussion. If you've got any thoughts on those in terms of which pieces you find most important, like even like tactically, like I like, for example, like the hero image means a lot to me. Like I'd love to hear that sort of thing, because we will get deeper into this. But your thoughts on what should matter in a 2025 brand analysis?
Well, I think that everything begins with the audience. Who is it that you're trying to change? Who is it you're trying to impact? What do we want them to remember about us? And I think that, the two leading candidates, be the Carney and Freeland. I agree with the assessment that Corey's made, that the other brands tell us that they're just simply trying to compete. Those two are telling us a very different story about themselves, a very different story about what the challenges are that they're faced with. And I don't want to get ahead of myself and start saying, well, this is what the brand is and this is how the brand is being interpreted. But both of them are telling a story to Canadians in general, not just to Liberal members, the 250, 300,000 people who will sign up, but a much, much broader conversation. And not only that, they're both trying to put a spin on the past, right? Mark Carney's launch, for example, very much definitive of the overarching brand. The choice of doing it in a small community hall, when it would very easily, he could have filled a much larger room. But that small community hall was a choice. That was something that took the brand in the direction that the campaign actually wanted to go. And we saw from Freeland's campaign launch that she was denied that, mostly by protesters, but also in part by her own campaign and her own campaign choices. So the brand structure is this really emphasizes that you control the input. You don't necessarily control the output of how the brand is perceived and received.
I think it's a great point.
Emphasize that for young Corey.
Great point by both of you. Corey, give us any round us out with any thoughts, and then I want to go through each. We'll start with the top two, and then we'll go down the line.
So what Carter said about Carney's launch is super important, because you can look at various launch techniques and you can say, well, does a big event make sense? Does a small event make sense? Does streaming make sense? Does it not make sense? And a lot of the time you'll argue the pros and cons, merits of those things. But anyone who's worked with me knows I've got a bit of a shorthand for this, which is brand answers all questions. If you work backwards from how you want to present yourself, those things resolve relatively quickly and relatively easily. So I'd be curious to hear, Stephen, the conversation that might have occurred in the Carney campaign, so much as you can provide it. But that to me, and you don't always get it right, right? Sometimes you fuck it up, but that to me is well, who are we trying to be? Well, then of course this is how we have to launch, right? And when I see the Carney launch video, and how it started with the graphics of, I was born here and then I lived in Edmonton. And then a lot of his Canadian origin story is in Edmonton. I played for this team. I went to this high school and then I got a scholarship to go play hockey here. And by the way, what a flex just to show him in his hockey gear at Harvard. Not mentioning he went to Harvard. Just, he's a hockey player at Harvard. I guess we could figure out the rest.
Fucking H right in the middle of that crimson colored jersey. Oh, I'm sorry. No, it was a school just outside of Boston.
It was an NCAA school. Don't worry about it.
Oh my God. Yeah. Close to Somerville, if you know the area.
So all great. My point is this. It's clear what they're trying to do, what you're trying to do, I guess, because I don't know what credit. You don't deserve shit for credit.
Probably
what Braden
none.
is trying to do, and the smart people around Braden, what they're trying to do is create this sense of...
and just so people know, Braden's the guy with the title of campaign manager.
That's right. When your campaign slogan is "It's time to build," and your story becomes about how you built yourself and what built you, great, right?
That idea and the idea of emphasizing the hockey, the Edmonton and the Laurier Heights, that all came from Carney. We were trying to find the right location.
That's the right answer. You should have done that with the Shihal.
Yeah. Well, I'm learning. I'm learning. And it all came from Carney because he was the one who really wanted to make it about hockey and his absolute passion for hockey. It's not put on. Some people, I think, put on their passion for hockey. His is not. It is a legitimate passion. And to be in Edmonton and to launch in Edmonton made a lot of sense for him because of the childhood, but also because of how he perceives his own growth. So the brand structure was rooted in reality, and I think that's one of the best brand structures you can build. When you're actually building a brand that is true, that is built off of the truth of it. And I think that Freeland also has this. When we get to talking about hers, I think that she is talking about the exact same, she has developed a brand that is as true to her as this Mark Carney, It's Time to Build, is true to him. And both of them can be quite proud of their brands as they're unfolding.
Okay, let's jump into this. I think that's enough on the table in terms of what we need to assess our brand. We'll start with the websites, and because they do, while they are not inclusive of everything that is a visual identity, an identity, or an outcome of a brand, I think they house a lot of the items, including photos, the language, the overall sort of taglines. Carter talked and Corey, you've both talked about the Carney one. Let's start with Krista Freeland. She's at christafreeland.ca is where her campaign's at. She's leaning heavily on the last name. People can look this up. That's better than me explaining any of it. So I won't. I won't explain any of it other than turning it over to you guys if you want to talk about it. Let's start with this. What did you like? What did you not like? And where did this overall kind of land with you? So plus, minus, delta, right? Plus, minuses, delta. Corey, can I start with you on Krista Freeland? Give me your plus, minus, delta on her.
Well, the plus is the word. She obviously is most comfortable when she's dealing with the written word and she's telling a story. And I think that makes perfect sense. That's her background. That's who she is. And I really do believe she has a good sense of what she wants to do. However, I'm going to give you a couple of minuses here. And unfortunately, they do somewhat stack together. One minus is the polish of her visual identity here, and I think it is such a fascinating example to me about graphic design and how there is such a fine line between stellar graphic design and bad graphic design. And I think, unfortunately for her, she's on the bad side.
You're not, to be clear, you're not saying good and bad. You're saying stellar, like, oh, this is
stellar,
unique, interesting, like historic, and bad.
That's right. And so she is clearly the one who's got the most unique, like you know what she's going for, and it's quite unique, and it's got a certain almost like a explainer video now. This like the kind of the overlays
the
that she's doing,
free
and all of it.
Land, yeah.
But the font size, not quite right. The font weight, not quite right. The way the maple leaf and the A is there, it's just not quite right. And kerning, not quite right. Everything's not quite right. And it's a great example about how I think I don't want to denigrate anybody who's did it. And obviously everyone's doing this under absurdly short timelines.
Yeah.
But I think either another 2 weeks or another 2 professionals in the room, they could have made that sing. They could have figured it out and they could have made it sing. Their concept is so good, but the execution is so middling. And as a result, unfortunately, you don't get the concept score. The concept almost plays against you unless you can land the concept. And so that's why people do tend to take it safe on design. And you can say to her credit, she didn't take it safe, but I'd say to her detriment, she didn't deliver on it. It's also by far the sloppiest of the pages on some technical components. It was driving me up the fucking wall today when I was looking at it, and she's got all of these buttons at the top, and with any luck it'll be fixed by the time you good viewers are looking at it. But as you hover over them, it's changing the weight around it, and there's like a 1 pixel difference. So this bar is just like shivering, it's just moving one pixel
exactly
at a time
what you're talking about, yeah.
As you're doing it. Come on, man, it's 2025. We should be able to figure out basic CSS at this point, and they didn't. And so again, it just creates a sense of, rather than like, here's the thing, you can go for that super minimalist, super polished, super slick, super like posh thing that she was going for, but the minute shit like that starts happening, it's gone, it's over, it's done. So that's one of the minuses.
That's an interesting point, because she is going for like a real rich, and I don't mean that like in a wealth sense, but like a real rich, like depth. Like the comparison I've jokingly sent to you guys, and I think it floats online too, is the current King Charles portrait, right? Like King Charles, and like it's like a very rich, royal, textured sort of thing, and you could see what she's going for. But can I ask a clarifying question to you, Corey, before I jump over to Carter? Because I do want to get both of your deltas too in terms of what you change. When you say really like the concept, can I be clear? Is that the free land concept? Is that the red? Is that the what do you mean? Yeah. Can you clarify that for me?
So I mean the visual identity specifically when I'm saying I really like the concept. Because the one other thing I want to put, and maybe Carter will expand, so I'm not going to dwell on it, is the other minus I give her is the story, right? But just to wrap off like the visual identity, I do want to say it is a great concept, and if she were to win, and if there were like an army of party designers and external designers working on it, you could do something with. You could do something really good with that.
With what she's put out.
But this
raw.
is not it. This is not it.
And I think your point around the fact that people have had to release their drafts is a good one, right? Like people have had to release V1s and V2s is a good one. I'm not making excuses for anyone, but I think it's fair given the timelines in some ways.
Well, sure. And Carney had to like drop his logo because it was the same as a fucking like collections agency. So oops. But I will say that the others' drafts are, in my estimation, stronger. Like they did, but they played it safer. So I mean, judge accordingly. I judge negatively because outcome matters.
Carter, plus minus delta. What do you like? What do you not like? And then we'll do the changes together. What would you change? How would you make it stronger?
Let's begin by saying there's nothing easier in the world than to pick on someone else's creative. So I don't want to come across like I'm just picking on creative. I'll leave that to Corey. I don't disagree with his Freeland comments. I think, to
be fair, literally what I do for a living.
I know.
So
I'm just saying there's nothing easier.
Do neither of you like
That's
free
why you
land?
do it.
Can I address that?
No, I don't.
Neither of you like free land? Why? Talk to me about that.
I like free land, and I'm gonna put it into the context in which I like it. I don't like the design. I really don't like the font choice. There's a number of choices that were made in the free land design that I don't like. And Corey, I think he said it better than I'm going to say it, so I'm just going to leave that with him. What I'm going to talk about is the literal wrapping in the Canadian flag and the red that is the Liberals. And everything that she has done now looks like you are looking at it through a Canadian flag. You are looking at the free land through a Canadian flag. You're talking about our land strong and free. You're looking at it from this nationalist point of view at a time when our nation is literally under threat.
The
And
clarity
I
on the
like
ballot box question, I think, is an interesting point there, right?
Yeah,
she's the clearest on Trump, Canada. I'm Canada. Like I get what you're trying to say there.
Well, and she is saying, I am the Liberal Party, right? Justin Trudeau is not the Liberal Party. He does not own this Liberal Party. Mark Carney does not own this Liberal Party. I own the brand of the Liberal Party. And the wrapping herself in the red, while I am not necessarily a big fan of it, it's not about whether or not I'm a fan of the brand. It's about whether or not the brand has got a clear statement that is being made. And I think that the statement that is being made between the free land, the wrapping in the colors of the nation and the colors of the Liberal Party, it does remind me of the King Charles portrait. It does make me wonder how much of this was emphasized. And yeah, I don't think it's a great idea that you necessarily put your picture and you look like the devil, personally. But
Yeah.
I see where they were going, and the direction that they were going is very clear to me. I am the Liberal Party. I am wrapped in the flag of Canada, and I'm not going to be ashamed of it. And I'm super impressed by that direction. I think that they could have had a lot more stuff on the website. It could have been a lot more detailed. It could have given us more. And I don't like the video just being kind of embedded from YouTube is kind of, 15 years ago too. Like it doesn't look like it's polished the same way that I would like it to be polished. So I'll leave it at that because I don't want to come across like I'm being some sort of critic. I do see where she was going, and I like where she was going. I like the brand story that she wanted to tell.
Corey, what are you thinking here?
Well, you asked about the Freeland thing.
Yeah, I want to get your comment on that. That's what I meant in particular.
Okay. Well, one of my big concerns with it, and this is going to sound really small and maybe even petty, but the way she presents her name is not how anybody says her name. And there's just something about that actually challenges me, right? And to me, it says almost like you're trying too hard. I feel like it would have been a much stronger creative concept if it had been more subtle. Like it's just too much, there's just like sometimes you can go too far with an idea and you're trying to shoehorn the idea. And it's, yeah, of course, like what a happy coincidence. Your name is free land at a time when we're talking about defending ourselves from the United States. That must have felt like such a fucking gift. And in a way it was, but it's like gilding the lily, right? It's just a little too much. It reminds me a lot of, a story about when they were creating the original Macintosh. And anybody who had a Macintosh in the 80s or 90s will remember there was like the closed Apple and the open Apple button that was on like your Apple II or whatever. And this little thing that looks like I don't even know what you call it, like the box with the nubs around it that's on the command button on a modern Mac. That symbol didn't exist at the time. And Steve Jobs, there's a story about him losing his mind because he's looking at a menu in this Mac, because this is the first time there's like drop-down menus, right? And it's just showing the hotkeys for all of this stuff, and every single one of them has an Apple logo, either a closed Apple or an open Apple. And he says, you're denigrating the logo. You're using the logo too much. You're just saturating it. It's starting to mean nothing. Like you've got to put more reverence on the logo. And so then they found the command logo, and the rest is history. But the point is what he was saying about the logo. Like the minute you're taking like your name and you're trying to distort it to do all of these other things, there's risk. And you're trying a little too hard there. And I know that might sound out there, but it's I think it's a challenge when you start fucking with your core brand.
Yeah, but this is you saying again, she's trying too hard. It goes too far. It doesn't quite get there. It doesn't quite hit. All of this is true, right? Like she chose a direction. She chose something significant to try and achieve, and she went all the way there. She just fell a little bit short on the final execution. Given that this was all implemented within, 7 days,
yeah.
I'm still super impressed that they went as far as they did and they reached as hard as they did.
I think you're being too charitable, because at the end of the day, they have a campaign to run, and they knew the parameters of it being 7 days, right? And at a certain point, there is a conversation about risk that needs to occur where it's like, hey, we can play it safe and we can deliver that. Or we can swing for the fences and we can fuck that up. And, I'm not sure that I would say they fucked it up.
Yeah,
I think that would be a little harsh.
Fuck it up. They just didn't.
They didn't land it. It's mediocre. I would say of the big 3 websites, I'm only going to count Carney, Freeland, and Gold. It's the worst of the 3. And it's not the least ambitious. It's the most ambitious. It has the concept that could be the best, but it's the worst of the 3.
Okay, yeah. I'm gonna ask a few pointed questions on these just to kind of make sure I get your opinion. The image that she uses. So I know it's wrapped in red. What do you kind of think of that hero image? It's on every single. So if you go to party renewal plan or other than that one, I guess, donate, volunteer, you see that image kind of underneath of Christia. Thoughts on the portrait style image singular of Chrystia Freeland versus what you see with other candidates, people around them, more sort of surrounded by everyday folks from a launch, etc. I'm kind of curious on your take with Freeland right at the heart and the center of it, not necessarily surrounded by people, almost like a intense portrait shot there. Any thoughts?
Yeah. Well, just that it's part of this is an example of how she tried to answer the story with brand, right? She, by the way, Carter, it's so funny that you're on the website and your face is more red because all of the red of the website is reflecting back on you right now.
And he likes that. That's the positive for Carter. He's into it.
But no, it's fine. But it is, I lost my point entirely. What the hell was I talking about?
The portrait photo. The portrait photo. Any thoughts on that and its use case versus having folks around her or anything like her in community or humanizing her in that way that political campaigns often think about and do?
No, I think that it's fine. It was a choice. It goes to the idea that you are trying to stand alone and that you're strong, and that's the point that I was trying to make that I lost. That it's all consistent with brand. She's telling the brand story. That's all well and good. That's fine. She's showing that she's the person who can stand up and she can stand tough. And part of that sometimes means standing alone visually. I get all that. It all kind of works. I don't have a problem with that. I think that's one of the cleaner parts of the implementation. But this is one of when I said the minus part of it is the story, I worry that she has not quite calibrated her story. I think that the story is a little bit too much about how she's going to fight and be tough. And I think that Canadians want a path forward. For sure. Canadians want to defend their country, for sure. But I think that all that's present for me in a lot of the material on that website, and even her speech, is the fight. And I don't think that's enough. And I don't think, at the end of the day, Canadians say the biggest pricks, the biggest fighters are the Liberals. Nobody's saying that, right? You have to be very careful that you're not presenting a question where the obvious answer is the other guy. And I think if you're actually looking for somebody who's going to fight, Pierre Poilievre is the more obvious answer there. So you've got to find a different framing of that defend and that construct argument than Chrystia Freeland is currently at.
That's where I thought she got there with the wrapping in the Canadian flag. I think that she's closer than you think she is.
Yeah, so Carter's already thrown out his constructive sort of delta for her. Anything you want to add, Corey, to constructive changes that you would suggest for Freeland? For Freeland, sorry. You've talked everything about the font, the weighting, the kerning, all that sort of stuff. You can address anything specific, or you can address something much broader in terms of constructive changes.
Yeah, I mean, clean it up. That's the obvious one from the visual identity point of view. In terms of story, I think you need to think about Chapter 2 in your story. Chapter 1 is I stand up. Chapter 2 is what do you do when you stand up? And I do actually believe that Chrystia Freeland's pretty deficient in that one right now. And I think part of it is because she was fighting in December. She's fighting now against Trump. Fight is what she's got. Fight is what brought her here. She needs to move past that in her own storytelling.
Let's move to Mark Carney. MarkCarney.ca. Corey, can I start with you again on the Carney campaign? So we've got a website that looks very different. Maybe I'll let folks look at it so that they can interpret what I mean by that. And of course, as compared to the Freeland website, not very different in terms of on absolute terms. Corey, plus minus delta. Start with what you like, what you don't like, and then we'll get into constructive changes together.
So again, if you go to brand and you think about the story that he wants to tell, that's part of it. But I mentioned earlier, you also bring your brand into it. And he's a banker, right? He's a staid finance guy who has helped save two different economies at two different times. He's a professional. And his website by far is the most staid of the websites. Again, of the big three I'm talking about here. It is the most traditional of the websites. It's everything that a website for a leadership candidate is supposed to be, and it's fairly well executed, minus that logo snafu that we already talked
They've
about.
changed back to a different logo.
Which they've changed to a different logo. Exactly right. It's professional. It's polished. It launched with, all of the websites are threadbare, but it launched with enough content. It told the story. It basically was the flat version of the video that came out. It's well done. It's crisp. It's responsive. It has the things that you need on a website like that. And I think that's the point, right? Like, he is basically saying, I'm going to be the adult. I'm going to be the professional who comes in, and I'm going to just professionally manage things, and I'm going to do it with positivity. And yeah, there's some quirky sides of me. And, I'm like, I think I mentioned on another show, like, I'm the banker who's the neighbor who you'd like love to go over and hang out with. Like, he's just a super nice neighbor and super erudite and has these things, but also can talk to you for 40 minutes about, the draft picks that the Oilers are looking at 3 years out or something like that, right? I think it does exactly what it's trying to do, and I think it does a pretty good job of being what he needs it to be because of the brand he's trying to present. I will say, however, that's a lower bar when your brand is to be boring, and it's not really his brand, and I think Carter would probably take exception to that.
Well, Carter's actually almost indicated as such at the top of the show. It's not to be innovative per se, it's just to power through.
But if your brand is just to be professional and polished, mission accomplished. You don't need to do crazy swings. In fact, if you took the exact same Chrystia Freeland approach and you executed it perfectly for Mark Carney, it would be a cacophony. It would be dissonant. It's like, who the fuck is this guy versus this brand? It doesn't make any sense, right? So again, when you think about audience and all of that and the brand that they bring into it, that matters. The negative that I give it, I don't know. I mean, like, it's hard to give it too much of a negative because it does exactly what you want it to do. I think
Can I throw one at you potentially?
Yeah, go for it.
Way too many calls to action, or am I wrong about that? When you go to this
No, you're 100% right. I was trying to limit more to like the visual identity.
But I'm getting right into the web aspect of it.
Yeah.
We can go where you're going, and then I'll take my point and I'll carve it out.
Because the other thing, the point that I had, but I thought was maybe not brand related, but I certainly think all of the candidates do poorly, but it's almost inexcusable that Carney did it poorly, was like, how is there not just a big sucking funnel taking you to register to be a Liberal? Like, it's gotten a little bit better, I think, over the past couple of days, but it's the website was not really like it had, to your point, I think there's 4 CTAs right at the top, and then there's additional reiterations of it all the way through the particular thing. No, I think that my bigger problem with the brand is that, like, the story feels like it's only part of the story. Like, there doesn't seem to be a lot of wraparound content, because even the others, like, you can point to their various social channels, and Mark Carney just doesn't quite have that same feel right now. And I think that he needs it more because he hasn't been in politics more. So if you're Chrystia Freeland, if you're Karina Gold, you can get away with a little bit less content.
That's interesting.
He doesn't.
Like, so can I address that point for a second before I come to you, Carter, on Carney's website and his brand, and any insider tales you may want to tell us as associated with that? Corey, is there a case to be made that Carney's kind of like running the banker, former central banker, like the vibe he's running is a bit more premium? I'm going to use that term because I don't have the right one. And that I actually want to add more friction. I don't want to be too accessible. Like, I don't want to be like TikTok dances are on one end of the spectrum, but you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Like, I actually want to be buttoned down all the way through. I don't want to actually have you get to know me beyond what I want to put out there, because that's kind of what I'm trying to do. I'm going to wear the same sort of thing every time. Very rarely you're going to see me hanging beyond, the collar and the sweater is probably the most casual. Like, I wonder if there's something to be said about that. Carter may have an inside track being like, these fucking idiots don't know what the hell they're talking about. But I'm going to posit that as a hypothesis back to you to react to.
Well, I definitely, I don't think premium is the word, but that goes back to my professional and polished, right? And I think that in part, that is the contrast with Justin Trudeau, who was seen as obsessed with social media. So Carney not having it maybe is a conscious choice too, or maybe not leaning into it as hard. He has social media, but not leaning into it as hard. I know there were some conservatives saying, oh, he doesn't have a YouTube channel. Who fucking cares, right? Like, that's pretty easy to, we have a YouTube channel. You can watch this right now on a YouTube channel, right? But the interesting thing that he has to contend with is, if you're Freeland, if you're Gold, there's a lot of content as to where you stand on various things. Yes, it's always been kind of the party positions, but you start to put out like the planks about how you would deal with like and both of them have actually put out plans for the party itself. Carney, because he's coming from outside, because we don't really know what he stands for, I think that the brand would have been served by having a little bit more on policy. And I don't mean a 30-page paper. I mean a one-line, I'm going to get rid of the carbon tax and I'm going to do something else.
Yeah.
And I can understand maybe why they might want to hold that in reserve, and maybe that's all coming. But
to try to make this a
you
giant sales
basically
funnel
asked
until it
me.
isn't.
You've basically asked me to come up with a minus, and I don't have a ton of minus.
Okay.
But that would be my one critique.
Carter, plus minus delta. It's a bit unfair to ask you this, but I'm curious to see where your head's at, and frankly, correct any misconceptions Corey and I may have, if you can, around the impulse to do certain things that Corey suggested at the very least.
Number one, calls to action are everywhere, and that's what should be. That is the.
You can never have enough.
You can never.
It's like
have
horns
enough.
in a car, right?
This is what happens in a political campaign now. This
Hire
is
a
the,
UX
You need
designer.
to meet Mark,
I
get to
beg
know
you.
Mark. I've already known Mark.
I'll tell
so
you,
that you
though,
can actually and then
Yeah.
Zain knows Mark button. Can you add a
This is-
Zain
Yeah.
knows Mark button onto the website
This
so
is
that
a
people can have
very-
that choice?
This is a very professional website. It does what it's supposed to achieve. It tells us a story. However, there is one glaring weakness, and I'm actually surprised that Corey didn't pick up on it. And that is that the story that is being told in this website is missing a giant chunk of the story that's being told about the brand in general. The brand in general, the best thing that they have is the video, and the video's not here.
I don't see that.
Are you talking about, just so listeners?
You're right.
and
You're
I'm
100%
clear,
right.
Are you
bio.
talking about the newest video that they've done, or like the
Yes,
Daily Show
it's not
interview?
on the website.
No, the one that the video that starts off with the Daily Show clips, and then goes into his history as a hockey player. The one that you guys were referencing earlier with the big H on the jersey. That video is money in the bank. It tells a story about who Mark Carney is, and it really defines the brand in a way that this website does not. And this website, while it is good, while it is functional, while it does the job that it's supposed to do, it isn't doing the job of establishing the brand in the same fashion that the video is.
Why
the
is
very
it not
first
there,
thing
Carter? Why is it not there?
I
I'm
don't
not
have-
asking. I'm not asking like be responsible for it. Why do you think it's not there? Because you're also the same guy
Because
who
we
made
launched-
the comment. You're also the same guy who made the comment that embedding YouTube is like a 15-year-old exercise, which is
Yeah.
what Freeland's done. So I'm curious what you're like. To me, I almost thought of you saying that about her as a rationale for why you don't have yours on your website. Okay,
You gotta
okay,
have
okay.
the video. You just gotta make it look like you don't want to watch the next video is whatever you're streaming, right? Like you don't want it to pop up with now watch the next video on your streaming application. This
By the way,
is supposed
Vimeo is great for that. If folks ever wonder,
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah.
But the point of the exercise should be to put up a video on this. And why it's there, I think it's just a factor of not wanting to make too many changes to a website that's doing one job, and that one job is supposed to be registering liberals. We can debate whether it's doing that job well enough. But I suspect that most of the liberals that have been registered have actually been registered through the Liberal Party's own portal. I know that
Yeah,
that's where things seem to be
Not
being
through the
directed.
front door of the campaign, so to speak, which
Right,
is what
we're
every
not getting
campaign is
that-
kind of first form, second form, right?
You're not getting that data capture. It doesn't work. You can't build a website that does the data capture. We talked about this a little bit in the last episode. You can't get that data capture on the website. You can get the data capture for
Why can't
sign
you?
up because
Is
it just won't allow you to do the sign up.
Oh,
and
it's a
register,
technical thing.
and
I
then
see.
flip it through to the primary site at the Liberal list or the Liberal side. It
We did
just
that on
won't let-
Nenshi, but I guess it's different portal, different sort of technology.
different portal, different softwares. So this is instead it's sign up for updates, which is sign up so we can get contact you and find out more.
If
But it's not the same as register now and get and be registered with the Liberal Party.
Carter, but while I have you, any other constructive deltas and constructive changes you would make? You mentioned the video. I feel like you like the brand, that it doesn't take too many shots. Does it tie into your first comment though, which I know sounded like a bit of a throwaway at the beginning of the show, which is like you guys are looking 100 yards down the field, right? This is just the first step. So like you're not necessarily looking for groundbreaking innovation. You're not necessarily looking for certain things. You're looking to get through this process.
Is this
Does
a
that
website,
tie into to that?
Is this a website for the next Prime Minister of Canada? And I think the answer is yes and no.
You want people to hold you to that bar though?
Yeah, I do. I think that this should be something that, is it close to the website of the next Prime Minister of Canada? It's pretty close. Is it the website of the next Prime Minister of Canada? Maybe with the video and a few design tweaks. Like, I think that if I was running the campaign, I'd probably be saying, okay, we're doing a significant overhaul. We're going to pop a brand new website tomorrow once the Register as Liberal is over. And that new website is going to have the video. It's going to tell more of the story. It's going to throw up a couple of policy pieces. It's going to be talking about Mark Carney, the Prime Minister, not Mark Carney, the guy who's trying to shill for registrations.
Interesting. Yeah. And there's to be said, you make a good point. We are going to reach a sort of chapter change in this leadership race where the sprint for registrations and selling, I guess, selling memberships, as it's conventionally said, is going to end. And we're going to enter this new sort of era in terms of what that looks like.
Yeah, exactly.
Corey, I'll get to your constructive delta, but Carter makes an interesting point. Minimal policy, if any, on the Carney page. I'm just looking at that right now. Versus Freeland, minimal policy, but does have a party renewal plan, a 6-step party renewal strategy, which I think is interesting from the perspective of audience as well, right? Carter's talks here about hold me to the standard of next Prime Minister of Canada. Freeland is wrapping herself in the flag, making sure she's centered as Liberal, and then talking about the party. So they've deliberately or not chosen distinct swim lanes, even in their lack thereof, and or chosen policy prescriptions that they've put out there. Respond to Carter. Anything else on your constructive delta list for Mark Carney?
So I'm not fussed with his video not being on the website. First of all, we live in a more of like an ecosystem environment now, and there are a lot of channels that can carry that. But there's a very practical reason not to rely on people going to your website to find your video. I think actually, I will say the Carney campaign, I tried to find it on YouTube and I really struggled, and I think that's a big miss. Right? Because sometimes you just go to where you think videos are and you want to find it. But the reason you want to drive people to those other channels, the social channels, whether it be Twitter or Facebook or YouTube or any of them, rather than them going to an embedded version on your page is, drumroll please, nobody fucking shares it when it's on your page. All of the social shareability that's built in and the way that the systems try to ping you to kind of retweet and like and move it forward and propagate it does not exist on an embed, which is why people have moved away from an embed. They want, if you're going to look for the video, for you to go use it in a way that you are then going to further propagate it here. So I take Stephen's point, but I actually think if you create a video with buzz, you don't want to embed it. You actually want it to run its life cycle on social channels, and then you warehouse it on your website.
It's an interesting dynamic. It's an interesting dynamic, though. Corey makes, which is that if the video is what you watched and the link associated with the text on that tweet sends you to markcarney.ca, and then you're thrown the video again, you're kind of sent into a boot loop. But Carter also makes a compelling argument, which is if you go to the website, the video is the greatest sales pitch in order to get you to sign up, and it's missing. So I could see both sides of like the constructive tactical argument.
Going to point out to both of you that we talked about this a decade ago, more than a decade ago, when we all worked together. Do you recall? We discussed how people end up on home pages,
yes,
right? And we talked a lot about this. There's a hub and spoke model, and increasingly people go in through the spokes. They're not going to the hub and then going out. They're coming in through one place, they're ending up at the hub, and then they're going out to another spoke. And that, to me, like Carter, I just assumed it was intentional. I assumed they were saying,
to be honest, I did
find
too,
the website,
especially based on the Freeland content,
through the video.
Yeah.
They go here, and then we get them to do other things.
Respond to this, Carter. I think it's a nerdy but very interesting debate to me.
I retain the position that telling the story was the most important thing, and it is a better story when told by the video. And that's what the website is designed to do. The website is not just designed to simply register members. Now, I think that we'll probably see a change in the coming days.
Yeah. Well, look, I just also assume the website will be refreshed now that the call to action is being refreshed. And I assume now that it's run its course through social media, you're going to see the video warehouse there. But I assumed it was all pretty practical strategy.
Anything else on Carney? Can we move to gold?
I think we should.
CarinaGold.ca. Carter, can I start with you on this one?
Please.
An interesting website. hero image, large hero image of Karina Gould on it. The KG being used on the main page with the Canadian flag, but not necessarily just like a standard issue Canadian flag. There is some unique design elements to this, including the little triangle at the bottom. Once again, for folks, go see this, so you don't rely on my descriptions for this. Has a singular call to as a donate, register, singular call to action, videos on it, and then has some written text. Visual identity, brand, Carter, start where you want. What did you like? What you did not like? And then we'll talk about the constructive deltas there on in karinagould.ca.
I love this site. I think that the picture of her in action as the hero shot is super strong. I think that the KG makes a tremendous amount of sense for the generations that she's trying to talk to. This is a introductory page to a person who's not well known outside of the political circles, certainly not well known between the 300,000 people that are going to be participating in this. And I want to know more. This is a site that says to me, this is someone I want to talk to. This is someone I want to talk about. And I quite like it. I love the maple leaf as the A and the Karina as well. A little bit further down the page, I like this page a lot. It's simple. But it tells me that she's wanting to brand herself and wanting to create a true brand to last for longer than the 45 days of this campaign.
But is it important, precursor to what Corey mentioned, for herself? Right? This is a Karina Gould exercise?
This is a remember me in the future exercise.
Before I come to Corey, because I do want to give you a fair shake like I do with him, I'll go through your list. That's what you like. You noted the strategy. What do you not like?
What do I not like?
It doesn't even have to be the website. The overall sort of brand presentation could be the text, could be any elements of this. You've seen the video.
I don't like the maple leaf.
I thought you just said you liked that.
I like
it as an A, but you don't like it.
Maple leaf in the letter. I like it in her name.
Oh, I see. It's the K.
But I do not like the actual maple leaf. There's too many points on it.
And by the way, I'll mention to people, this is not going to be the podcast where we take this particular logo, put it into Illustrator, look at the particular weighting, do all that sort of design analysis. Other people are doing that online. We're here to talk about the overall sort of brand, the story, what they're trying to communicate. And these aspects are part of it. So, just to be clear, Carter's comment there and whatever Corey thinks about the Karina Gould logo, that's the extent of what we're going to do. We're not going to, spend every second talking and dissecting the K, which I think is interesting. But
I really like the site. I really like the image. I would be hard pressed to come up with more things I would change.
Corey, plus minus delta. Let's start with plus minus. We'll go to delta together.
Okay, well, absent any brand goals, which would be a huge mistake, but I'll just say, absent any brand goals, this is the nicest looking webpage, in my opinion. And there's a couple of reasons I say that. I think that the palette is the nicest, it's the most modern, it's got the most interesting types, fonts and typesets, but I don't love all of the choices, but it's the most interesting. It certainly is trying to, convey a youthfulness. I think it's really funny, and I was kind of smirking to myself here when Stephen said, the KG makes sense for generation she wants to talk to, because in my notes here I have, and this gets into the negatives a bit, this is an old person's idea of a young person, right? this is what the website feels to me. It feels very stuck in the era of around 2010 to 20. Well, hey man, it feels stuck between 2010, 2015. It's got a very roots Olympic attire and the Vancouver Olympic Games vibe to it to me.
That's an interesting comparison.
And I mean, that's even with the choice of the outdoor shots and all of that, right? And in some ways, it is the one that is the closest and most direct line from the existing Liberal brand. And so this is kind of the paradox of Karina Gould's campaign to me. In some ways, she's youth and change because of who she is.
Yeah.
But a lot of what she's saying is probably the most consistent with the Trudeau Liberals and how the Liberals have presented themselves over the past bit. And she's a very good communicator. But my negative is I think this is not actually change. I think that if you put this to Canadians, unless they are so wowed by the fact that you are younger, and it also just wrecks my brain that she's a fair bit younger than me even, right? Because I don't think myself is that old.
Yeah.
Yeah. unless they're just wowed by that, like it actually is the one that feels the most like the Liberal Party right now. So when I was talking earlier about creating a brand, maybe for the general, maybe just for right now, maybe for yourself, I don't think this plays in the general. I think this is not what the Liberals need in the general. They need that professional. They need that polish. They need that fight even that Chrystia Freeland's got. I don't think they need this, and it's fine. But it is actually not that young. Like if you compared it to a Gen Z aesthetic, if you compare it to a Gen Z aesthetic, it's not a Gen Z aesthetic.
Does that status quo for you extend beyond the website, though, Corey, into her video and how she's communicating what she's saying?
It's a walk and talk, Zain. It's like the most played out, staid thing. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not taking a shot at you. You rode the wave at a good point. You did really well with the Nenshi walk and talk. But this is like the homage to your video, and it's not done as well as your video, right? Like it is a pretty traditional approach.
And our video was inspired by dozens and hundreds that came before.
This is my point.
Like, not to say anything that we've done is original.
Well, and again, I'm not, and like you don't need to be original in politics, but my point is, it's not as young and not as hip as I think that it's coming off to Stephen. That's all I'm saying.
It's an old man's young and hip.
It's an old person's idea of a young person.
When you guys were saying how Karina Gold being the youngest person in the race, that's actually not true. There is someone else running.
That's true.
Zain Velji is running for leader of the Liberal Party, and you can of course find my website at Full Confidence.
I actually think you're older than her, Zain. How old are you? Can we dox you on this?
Oh, that's fine. I think she's also an '87 born, but she might be. I'm an 87 born, so
Jesus, 87.
Full Confidence. Fullconfidence.ca. That's where you can Carter. When you go to fullconfidence.ca, okay, that's a website that makes a lot of sense because it's got too many calls to action, but they all lead you to the same spot. Unlike Mark Carney. Okay.
Yeah.
I got to tell you.
Yeah, really good work. Really good work by the Discord
might be my
community.
favorite one.
Constructive Deltas about the Karina Gold website. Corey, so you've got a criticism there. It's more so a criticism of Carter than it is Karina Gold.
Yeah, that's true.
So, but like, what would you constructively advise her to change? Well, what would you suggest that this? And I also find another comment interesting, which I may want to hit on before I ask you for this. Absent any brand goals is what you said.
Mm-hmm.
Now insert the assumed brand goals of Karina Gold, which I guess we'll borrow from Carter. Remember me in the future. How is this as a Remember Me in the Future website then?
If that's your brand goals,
let's just use it as a case, because Carter's put it on the table.
Can I at least discount like what we would assume the brand goals are, which is to try to win an election? I don't think that I've already said why. Like I think it's actually continuity too much for the Liberals. It doesn't feel like the type of change that Canadians have talked to us about wanting, right? Which is to be like a little more economically minded, to push forward into some of the more right-wing impulses that the Liberals sometimes have, shall we say, right? But if your goal is to be remembered in the future, it's different from the other campaigns. It comes off a little bit younger simply because it is using a choice of fonts that's a little bit different than the other campaigns, right? You don't have the sans serif debate. You've got some of these like really chunky, like blocky fonts. And I think it does okay on that front. I definitely think because it feels both different and polished, it will be remembered, and she will kind of be perceived as the future and moving forward. But that's an internal perception that I'm not really sure that the public would necessarily feel that. It needs to be a fair bit different, I think, from the current Liberal brand to really align with the brand that she's trying to present, which is I'm new, I'm change, I'm young. The visuals don't say to me, new, change, young. They say, I found a really good Liberal designer who's been working on Liberal campaigns for 10 years, and they're the best at the version of Liberal Party that we have right now, but it's the Liberal Party we have right now.
Answer my question of, does this meet the objectives of Remember Me in the Future, Carter's goal?
I mean, the visual identity does not. I think the combination of all of the elements, she's getting there. And certainly I think just the raw talent that she has in speaking is why she's going to be remembered.
Carter, anything else to add on this list from Constructive Delta, or should we power through some of the other individuals beyond what we'll call the top three?
If we don't make it to number 4, 5, and 6, then I think we're going to be very disappointing the listeners.
Yeah, well, I think we have to. Let's do should we do the closest thing to a rapid fire?
Let's do something like lightning round.
Yeah,
here,
who do you want to go for, Corey? You choose the person and you start. So and you can direct them. So we've got a few other folks. Ruby Dalla on the table, Frank Bayless on the table. Who else do we have? I'm missing.
Jamie Batiste.
That's right. I miss the final candidate that rounds out our six. Chandra Arya, of course, told today that he's not going to be an official candidate for the Liberal Party. Corey, who do you want to start with of the three?
Well, let's start with Ruby Dalla. Let's take it in the order you've done it here. This is a great example of your brand not just being what you present on a website. It's really hard to get past the fact that Ruby Dalla's brand is the stories about, and I have no idea about how the authenticity played out, but the caregivers for her mother who came to like another town hall and said she took my passports away and I couldn't go anywhere, and the idea that she took a limousine to a liberal convention, and the idea that her colleagues thought that she was very self-absorbed, and her brand when she sort of reached the end of her political career, or what we thought was the end of her political career, was not fucking stellar.
And
right?
just to be clear, so everyone's watching, rubyforpm.ca is this website. Keep going, Corey.
Yeah, and so of course she's been doing other things in the interim, like she's a human being who has, days to fill. And this website is, I think, I wouldn't even say it's a throwback to like 2011 or whenever she lost her seat. It's a throwback, I think. I don't even know what it's to, but like it also doesn't feel like it's even remotely connected to or aware of the modern Liberal Party and the way it presents itself, or remotely
in a good
connected
way?
to, or no, not in a good way, or connected to or aware of what her personal brand is. Like, I'm not saying that you want to background your mother when you are running for office. Like, it'd be a pretty weird thing to be ashamed of. But to have your mother as part of that prominent story, as I'm reading through that content, I'm like, oh, fucking right. I remember that story about her mother, right? And it's the story I just told you. And so I think it doesn't. Yeah, here's what I'll say. And I'm trying not to be too shitty. It is so clueless of context that it is almost baffling, right? It's clueless of how she is perceived. It's clueless of how the party has evolved. It is just like time froze and she just walked out of a 10-year trip in a parallel universe and created this website and created this candidacy. And it blows my mind. It seems like I just don't understand. You know what's missing on this website more than anything for me? Anything that makes me think she is a rational person for thinking she should even be in this race.
Carter, what's your take when you see this?
I agree with Corey 100%.
Well, okay, let's talk about the politics beyond the brand for a second. Why do you think she's doing this?
I have no idea. I think that if this is a re-entry into politics, she's not going to win this leadership. If this is a re-entry into politics, I mean, it's being done, I think, in a very ham-handed way. She is not doing anything to kind of defeat the idea that she's self-centered and like has an inflated sense of self. I mean, she's kind of doing the exact opposite of Mark Carney by floating all of her credentials and trying to make herself into a story, frankly, that hasn't existed for a decade plus. I'm not a fan of this website. I'm not a fan of the brand that she's trying to establish. I mean, the photographs alone. I mean, she's a very beautiful woman, and that becomes the driving force of the campaign.
There's something to add here into the mix, Corey. This could be brand, this could be motivation. We can kind of, all of it's all tied together at some point. 775,000 Instagram followers. Like there may not be a there. Conventional political wisdom says there's not a there. But it's perhaps part of her motivation to say, maybe there's a there. And we talk about other candidates having social media and their presence on social media. This is different. This is nearly 1 million followers on IG, and I haven't checked her other platforms. But there's something to be said about that. Or is there?
Well, there might be. I mean, I honestly don't know. And wouldn't it be funny if, so Carter has dropped this a couple of times, but certainly we're hearing that the Liberals have had quite a surge of registrations, and they're probably going to end up around where they were in 2013. And wouldn't it be fucking... I mean, peak comedy if half of those or more came from Ruby Dalla's, like, whatever her version of the K-Hive is, right? Like, I just think that would be really, really funny. Because it's not like it doesn't mean she's going to be successful going forward. Like, even if she somehow managed to win the Liberal leadership, I don't know. Like, this just doesn't look like it would do anything for Liberals'
This is not a
fortunes.
winning Canadian brand.
No.
Let's go with Bayliss. Let's move on to Frank Bayliss. Frank, BAYLIS.ca. Carter, can I start with you? Plus minus delta. You got a hero image of Frank. Portrait mode. Interestingly lit. Folks can check it out. And then a white, black, and red website across the board. What do you think of this brand? What do you like? What do you not like?
I have this feeling like I've entered a mob era with the second photograph. I mean, he comes straight out of The Sopranos for me. But the guy is unknown to us, right? Like, he's known to a small group of people. He's known within his own community, but he is not known to Canada. And we really don't get a real sense of who the guy is. He does have some policy elements, but we really don't get a sense of what this brand is trying to create, because it's not really a brand. It's the candidate page from 2011, right? Like, that's what it feels like to me. This is the same page that you would get in the standard website package from the Liberals in 2011. Am I close to the right year, or is it 2015?
Yeah, 15. But, like, I think your point is well taken. It's a weird one, right? Like, it has a real Connor has always followed politics vibe, which is not fair to him, because there is certainly, like, some there. Like, he was a member of Parliament, and I think we have to acknowledge that. But it feels I don't know. I mean, like, I think when the reaction of everybody is like, Frank Bayliss is entering the race and he's the first one in, that's fucking weird, right? You think, okay, well, how do I make that not weird? And you have to start thinking about that mission. And in a funny way, like, if you're going to be the candidate that comes from nowhere, you have to own it a little bit more than he is. And so this is a great example of, like, audience expectation versus... So whenever you're creating a presentation, I like to tell people, there's three things you need to know, right? Like, know your goals, know your audience, know yourself. And if your goal is to be Liberal leader, and you know your audience has deep skepticism, you have to have the self-awareness enough to know, like, I can't put up a page that just says, look at all of these random awards I've won. Look at the fact that I sold this company that my mother started for $1 billion. Clearly I should be prime minister. You've got to fucking lean into that a bit and say, like, you're probably, like, I'm imagining a video almost where it's like, you're probably thinking, who the hell is Frank Bayliss? Well, let me tell you who Frank Bayliss is. He's an entrepreneur of the year. He's a business person. He's an experienced politician. He's somebody who passionately cares about politics, who's been involved in Montreal politics, who's been involved in Canada politics, who's done international deals. Like, we always say don't repeat the charge, but this is not this. This is meeting people where they are and taking a few steps with them, right? Like, I am going to be that outsider that you're all so crazy for. And the funny thing is, in a funny way, like, Ruby Dalla he was a Trudeau MP, like, he was an MP under the Trudeau government. It's just like, I'm not even quite sure the outsider thing works for him in its current construct. So that's kind of my overview. My final point is, how many fucking logos do you have, Frank? Like, there was one logo when I Googled you, like, there was this little, like, I don't know, like, looks like a sprocket. Then there was the maple leaf and a shield. And then there was a version that was just the shield without the maple leaf. Pick one. And you know what? Tell the story that starts from a common understanding between you and your audience, which is they have none as to why you're in this race.
Before I leave Frank, Corey, your comments about the logo, I didn't get a chance to ask us about the Carney logo. What impact do you think it had on his brand or image or whatever you would want to call it? I'm going to call it the logo fuck up. You may not think it qualifies as fuck up, but what sort of impact does something like that have on a day one basis?
I think almost none when you clean it up as quickly as he did, which he did. That's the kind of thing that people are always pointing to, and they're saying, oh, it's a bit of a gaffe. And obviously, if you're trying to present as a professional, that's not great, but they cleaned it up so fast, it's hard. These things happen, right? And they shouldn't as regularly as they seem to have in Canadian politics the last bit. but they fucking happen. But it's a classic fail fast. Don't sit there and fight with this, collection agency, or say, no, it's okay, this logo's here. Say, holy fuck, it's a logo for a leadership campaign. It has zero value. Just put up a new one. Make sure there's a maple leaf in it. Let's fucking go, which seems to be what they did.
Carter, you're on the inside of that thing. What do you think?
I think the speed with which they reacted was very good. I mean, it came across almost like the first one didn't happen. It happened so quickly.
Right. We've got one final candidate to discuss. Jamie Baptiste, he's the MP from Sydney, Victoria, and also the first Indigenous person running for the Liberal Party of Canada leadership. Were you guys able to track down his website?
Yeah, kind of.
It's interesting, right?
He has a website.
Yeah.
It is got an expired security certificate, and it's for his re-election campaign.
However,
doesn't seem to be a lot of
this is what's interesting. However, what's interesting is that if you spell his name Jamey rather than Jamie, you land on a website, Balanced Vision for Canada.
Really? Okay, well then I guess I
Yeah.
didn't land on his website.
No, this is what's fascinating. I actually wanted to bring. I know you guys didn't find it, so I wanted to bring this up. I think this is really interesting.
How
so
do you
this,
spell
if you
it?
go,
How are you spelling this?
So his last name is the same, Battiste. Spell the first name Jaimey. So JAIMEYBATTISTE.com. You get onto a Squarespace site. Just to make sure this.
I can't even get to it. I mean,
Okay,
you're gonna have to drop this in the chat or
I'm gonna
something.
link this to you. I think this is what's fascinating about this, because it's
Okay, I think you might have found an unlaunched website. You
no,
legend.
it's on his Twitter. It's really interesting. It's on his Twitter. It's
Oh.
it's not linked many places. It's not in the
Oh,
bio. of his,
.com, not .ca.
no,
okay,
not
okay.
.ca. So I've sent
Yeah.
it to you guys.
Okay.
Because I do want to give him a fair shake.
Wow, we get to react in real time. This
You
is
do.
exciting.
You do.
This is exciting.
And this video is also on his socials, so that part you've seen. Interestingly, he does use the Liberal logo, which I believe you're not supposed to.
You're not,
and able
you're not
to
supposed to do that.
And then he's got this J and B, which seems to be surrounded by some artwork around it. Carter, you're wincing, which means you're going to go first.
I mean, it's not great. I really want to see the First Nations story. I really want to see, Jamie take off and be as strong as possible. But even in his video, he's got a different spelling of his first name. So it's going to be a little tricky to find him.
Yeah, that is a weird one. I'm wondering if he lost control of the site somehow.
I am, I hope for the best for him. I always think that we root for the underdog. We root for First Nations in Canada. It's an important story to be told. This does not tell it.
Corey, give me your quick reaction, and then we'll wrap it up here.
Well, look, I think it is actually summarized, and his goals and his brand and what he's trying to do are so well summarized by the quote that he has at the end. He says, before there was a Premier Wab Kinew, there had to be an Elijah Harper. Before there was a President Barack Obama, there had to be a Jesse Jackson. There must always be people willing to try, and there must always be people willing to take the first steps, even if their journey is one meant to pave the way for future generations. He's basically saying he doesn't think he's in it to win it. He's in it to be a trailblazer so that the next, up and coming, maybe even himself in a future contest, but the next up and coming Indigenous leader says, fuck yeah, I want, there are people who've done this before. Jamie did this back in 2025. There's a path here. I can do this. And I think that's great. I think if anything, he's selling himself a little too short. Even if you're not in it to win it, act like you're in it to win it.
Okay, I'm going to ask you guys final 3 questions here as we can go rapid fire. Carter.
3 more questions?
Best.
We did rapid fire for the last 30 minutes.
Best visual identity overall. So excluding everything, what looks and feels the best to you? If you were associating this without the political goals in mind, without having the Stephen Carter strategist hat on, and you were assessing this as just simply I like how that looks, who would you choose?
Oh, the aesthetic.
Yeah,
Just
best visual identity. Just purely visual identity aesthetic. You're assessing this purely on I like this a lot. You don't have to explain to me if it aligns with the audience and the political goals, but who's your best visual identity? I've got 2 other questions after this.
I think it's Mark Carney.
Carter's going to go with his guy, Carney. Corey, who are you going with on just the aesthetic alone, just the visual identity alone?
Aesthetic goes to Carney. The logo goes to Gold.
Oh, interesting. Do you like the Karina or the KG with the maple leaf in between? To talk specifics about
KG. I actually don't like the use of both of them. We didn't get into that, but if you're going to use the maple leaf as an A in one context and then use it in another,
like a
it starts to feel like an A, and that's confusing to me.
Like all of a sudden it's CAG.
Like all of a sudden it's CAG, right? And so that's my problem.
CAG. Okay, good. Corey, I'm going to start with you on this one. Best personal brand. Who's done this best for themselves? Who's branded themselves the best?
Oh, I think Carney. I think because now we're bringing it into an idea of how you're coming off and how that brand might be useful in the future. And I mean, that's pretty solid work he's done. But, again, I do want to say, like, in some ways, I don't want to take anything away from him because he understood the assignment and he did it. But he also had an easier assignment because his job is to be the staid professional banker. And that's a lot easier than what Christian Freeland was going for.
Carter, best personal brand that you saw or that you've seen in this Liberal race?
I want to say Carney, but I also want to say Gould. I think that for someone that was as unknown as she was, she's really leapt off the page for me. So, and if I say Carney back to back, I'm going to just look like a shell.
Well, you already look like
you do. No, it's fine.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Here's the final question. You can answer this however you please, but I find this to be interesting as like 3 practitioners talking about this. Which of these brands would you want to take and find your most talented designer in your network and say, give me 10 hours with this. I want to do something with it. So it could be, any of these that we've seen, even the final 3 that we rapid fired, and said, I'm going to take my favorite, best, most interesting designer and 10 hours, and I want this project. Which project would you choose, Corey, between the 6 that we have discussed today?
Freeland. But I do want to caution, and I said this, but I really want to underline, you could make that brand amazing. You couldn't just hand it to one of the other candidates and make it work. Right? Your brand is really tied to who you are as an individual, how you're perceived as an individual, and what your goals are. And so, I think that it's the one with the most unrealized potential, I suppose I'll say. I think it's the least transferable.
Carter, last question to you. 10 hours, a designer or a creative of your choice. Which project of these would you want to take on as a 10-hour sprint passion project?
Jamie Batiste.
You really?
I really do. I think that the First Nations elements would be fascinating to work with. I think that he wants to lean right into it and wants to tell a story that is unique in Canadian politics today, and I think that would be really fun to work on.
We did it, guys. A tight 35 minutes on the Liberal brands. We are going to leave it there. That is a wrap on episode 1848E of The Strategist. My name is Zain Velji. With me, as always, Stephen Carter, half asleep, Corey Hogan. We shall see you next time.